Good morning. Welcome to the Light Board meeting for December 20th, 2023. First, a call to order, and our upcoming meetings are January 10th and the 24th are our next two meetings. I didn't see any minutes. I just want to confirm, Warren, there's no minutes to go over at this meeting.
There are no minutes to go over.
Awesome. All right. So that's the intro. The next step is the renewable energy policy. I wanted to have a board discussion about this write-up. Last time this came in front of us, we wanted more background in the written policy. So I want to have that discussion about what that background should be, and talk this through. Dave, do you want to take this, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
take it. So back in 2017, the board voted in July to adopt a strategy that was to help clean up the power supply in terms of making it carbon free. There were three options that were presented at the time. One was a 5-year plan to add X amount to the energy, or it was at the time, it was, we talked about doing a surcharge on the bill to collect revenue to buy RECs. And we presented three options. The board voted unanimously to adopt a plan that added it started off as a penny, then it went to a penny and a half, then 2, and then 2.5 pennies.
Did we get to 2.5?
No, we haven't got to 2.5.
Okay.
We're at 2, and the idea was, and it was discussed, whether it be a surcharge or whether it would be floating right into the energy component. The board at the time decided to add the increase into the energy component, and the idea was that our energy we were going to be purchasing clean energy regardless. So why not put it in there opposed to pulling it out? So currently in the energy component, there's 2 cents that is added in there, and that's revenue that's collected that we use to purchase renewable energy credits. Now, it was very clear at the time when it was voted on that the board said that money could also be used to support carbon-free projects. We haven't done that yet, and we're also not at the 2020 forecasted 2.5 cents. We haven't had to do that because the revenues that are collected are enough to cover our power supply right now and then some. So we have a little bit extra. So that was done. There was a memo submitted to the board. Everyone should have it. That's currently on the board. And there was 3 options. We went with option B, which was a penny, penny and a half, 2 pennies, and we haven't implemented the 4th piece of that, which was 2.5 pennies. And the reason why is the revenues are enough to meet what we need at the moment. So that's the background on it. Now, we never fully adopted a written policy. So we adopted what was in the memo, and nothing's formally written up, which I think is something that we should do at some point, but it wasn't done at the time. So that's the background.
Okay. Yeah. So this is great. This is a good history and catch up. Dave, do you mind if I share my screen? I've been what I'm typing is I'm typing in what you're writing and some of the questions that I'd like this policy document to give future boards as an understanding.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
All right. Let me see if I can figure out which window it is. All right, so you can see my email. So what I've highlighted is what was sent to the board last time we talked about this a few months ago. And here below is some of my notes on things that would be added. So, you know, dealing with rate shock. This is a topic that was discussed by the board previously. Rec prices can be, you know, $10, and then, you know, they can hit their ACP and be $65. They rarely, you know, it's a managed market. It doesn't go too crazy, but each $10 is a penny on the bill. So if we want to keep the pricing stable for our customers, we don't want to fixate on keeping that 100% non-emitting. We want to be able to adjust the percentage and not the rate as quickly, so that people don't see an extra 4 cents in their bill. John, I know you know a lot about this, more than I do, so you can talk about the market, I assume.
No, I just was going to mention that the ACP right now is 40.
When did that change happen? Sorry, I didn't know.
2 years ago, I want to say, Dave.
So I can do one thing at a time and not very quickly. So the ACP is going down from 65 to 40, and the rec prices generally are sitting at the top of that ACP, and that is because the market is undersupplied with renewable energy compared to the renewable standard portfolio goals. And when there's an oversupply of renewable energy compared to the renewable portfolio standard, that value can drop rather quickly. And that is now, instead of a larger swing, it's maybe a 3-cent swing on the bill. And if we put in a policy that says we must maintain 100% non-emitting, then when that market flips from oversupplied to undersupplied, you can have a 3-cent increase or decrease on customer bills, and that's pretty shocking to them. So the boards previously had decided that we would do half-cent increments. So if we found that we were under collecting for reaching our 100% target, that we would increase the rate of collection by 0.5 cent, not the full 3 cents that the market might have determined that year. And then the reverse as well. So we started at a penny in 2018. We increased in 2020, I think it was, to 1.50 pennies, and then 2 pennies later on. And now we've reached that 100% target. So I want to confirm with this board that we are going to keep that method of avoiding rate shock, but that means that we may at some point need to sacrifice the 100% offset of our emissions. Any thoughts on that particular statement? Is this board generally in agreement with that concept? I got a thumbs up from Bianca. All right. Great. So that is something I'd like to see in our statement. The form that is submitted by the state and the reporting by Mass DEP for retail sellers. This is how we judge the overall portfolio. It's not in the adjustment of this collection for this offset, but it's part of our general strategy. And I want thoughts on the board or whether or not we should have it in this document. Is this, because we're calling this document the renewable energy charge? Should we say our non-emitting strategy or our non-emitting policy? Should we broaden this document to talk about how we get the portfolio to 100% non-emitting, or should we focus this on just how we manage the purchase of unbundled RECs? John.
Well, I guess the other element to that, Brian, is, and I thought where you were going was, when we talk about non-emitting, that's broader than renewable, right? That could include, and we talk about renewable, some would suggest large hydro isn't renewable. Clearly, nuclear would not be renewable, but it would be non-emitting. So
Right.
those are all kind of policy questions, I think, that we need to sort through.
Yeah, so this has been taken up by boards in the past, and the 2017 Article 51 said that we would increase rates to buy unbundled RECs to reach 100% non-emitting. It did not say renewable, and that was deliberate, and that allowed us to enter into nuclear contracts as a way to reduce the price of non-emitting electricity, because renewable contracts tend to be a lot more than the nuclear, but we also want to support new renewable development and projects and renewable projects in general. So it wasn't a all or nothing. It's an energy mix. And so it has been defined as non-emitting. And we can talk about that balance. And that's a big part of the public forum that's coming up in February. So talk with the public about that. But we as a board should get up to speed on what we've done in the past and what your thoughts are today. Warren.
Yeah, given what you said about the history of this, I think the document should be titled non-emitting. That is the general framework. That doesn't mean a board couldn't decide that it only wants to have RECs from renewable energy and exclude nuclear or exclude large hydro or something like that. But given the fact that that hasn't been said, it seemed like it would be better for the document to be called non-emitting, and that's sort of an evergreen policy that could change over time.
I agree. Anyone, John or Bianca, what are your thoughts? Do you like the change in the title, John? I see a thumbs up.
Yeah, I like that too.
Okay.
Just it makes it clearer, I think.
Yeah, and I think that was some of the confusion the first time this came in front of the board. Was our request sounded like we want to know how RECs were managed, but really we want to know how are we cleaning up the portfolio. And new members, Bianca pointed this out in the meeting, is that we need to, as a board member, we need to kind of know what has happened in the past. Laura, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted, you briefly mentioned it, Brian, but I just want to clarify. So the very short memo that is above your questions here in front of us was a memo that was written by staff to narrowly answer the question, how is the renewable energy surcharge that's collected in bills, how is that administered? How do we turn that into non-carbon emitting power from a like a tool perspective, right? Internally, just how does it work? It wasn't, what I think you're talking about now is not a memo from staff. It's a memo or a paper, a position paper that the board authors, right?
Yes.
They put together, that's covering a much larger topic than, so I think what you see above you shouldn't even really be a starting point. for this discussion because it really was just to answer one little tiny piece. And maybe you should start with, I don't know, something you guys have written in the past.
Yeah, and I agree, Laura, that this is what came back as feedback from the board last time was we wanted more of a strategy document that was what the board's position was, so that future boards could understand it. And this is more of a mechanical, how are we going to manage this particular count? So this is good. We're getting on the same page now. Just make sure I'm running on time. Yep. So, oh, before I go on, John.
I mean, and maybe not to get too far ahead, but I'm just wondering if, you know, my understanding in terms of current practice might be appropriately codified in terms of this memo, would be to frame it in terms of that, you know, to outline a series of priorities. You know, and clearly one of the priorities you voiced, which I would agree with, and which is outlined here, is generally a preference for the promotion and support of new renewable projects. I think another clear objective is to have the highest possible proportion of non-emitting resources. And, you know, one strategy that can be employed, and I think that the light plant has employed to achieve 100% renewables, is to procure lower cost, non-emitting resources, you know, in particular, nuclear, to achieve the 100% non-emitting resources when the cost of RECs approaches the ACP. So, you know, it seems like within past policy and these objectives, we have the beginnings of kind of a framework here or a possible strategy.
Yeah, I try to be very careful about my word usage when I say non-emitting and I say renewable. So I don't think the board has formally set percentages of targets for the portfolio overall as non-emitting, renewable, you know, this offset with you know, market and RECs, unbundled RECs. I kind of think of them in thirds. About a third is nuclear and just non-emitting. About a third, and the power supply page can show exactly what this is each year, but about a third is contracted or bundled class 1 RECs with their generation source, and about 20% to a third is arbitrage, is market purchases where we collect this extra fee to offset by buying unbundled RECs. And this all goes into that the state form, which I think is the AQ 31, which is a form where the light plant tells Mass DEP where it received its power at the end of the year. And then about 2 years later, they write a report that says the emissions based on those energy sources. And that's kind of how we're judged on that 100% non-emitting target, which is, it's unfortunate that it's 2 years in the rear, which is frustrating, but that's the process. But looking here, I just want to go through this list and make sure if any of you have questions that we talk about it now, because I think the next step in this process is to kind of draft something up, send it around to the board, get feedback, and then bring it in for a vote at a future meeting. So the goals or priorities around bundled and unbundled, I just quickly mentioned that, where ideally we buy bundled, wind with the class one, and so forth. But unbundled is a necessity. And I think that needs to be stated in here. The role of non-emitting for hydro and nuclear, how it's generally less expensive. It's existing facilities. So it's not really additive to emissions reductions in New England, but it does provide us non-emitting power that is less expensive, allowing our product to be more widely used for fuel switching and others, because we have to keep our rates lower in order for people to utilize this clean energy. I'm trying, before I run out of time, I'm just trying to think of what else. And again, this goes to the kind of the priorities thing that John mentioned. We do want to prioritize new renewable projects, but those tend to be a bit more expensive versus some existing projects that are renewable energy. And again, we have to manage the cost of energy. We're not doing a separate line item. Past boards have decided to put it into the energy charge. Now, there was that vote that the collection of the 2 cents could be used for projects. I disagreed with this, but it was a board vote and it was a board decision. And the reason is that I don't want to create a funding source that's underfunded for clean energy projects like in-town solar, and then be limited by the funds collected in that account. I don't think that's the case, but I don't want to establish that for a future board. But what are other people's thoughts on that? Should we keep this strategy clean and focused on making the portfolio non-emitting, or should we add in the collection in the generation of the energy charge to fund other projects, other clean energy projects? Does that make sense?
No, I'm not sure I follow that.
Okay, yeah, it's wonky. It's basically if we over collect for, like, say we're collecting 2 cents for the rec fee, and then the market for recs drops to $10 for a rec, and we're over collecting, those funds could be used to build charging stations or a solar project or some other clean energy project. It was vague at best, and it was kind of thrown in as an option when discussions were happening with the board.
I don't think a charging station was part of that conversation. It was more funding towards a renewable project.
Okay, all right. Bianca.
Yeah, I like to keep things really clean. I don't like the fuzzy stuff. If we're gonna over collect, if at any point it's over collected, just return it to the ratepayer. We already have the solar task force working on things, and they've got financing plans that they're going to put in as debt, which is going to come back anyway. And I think any renewable project that we do, it should be well thought out and have a funding strategy attached with it. But if we keep it nebulous, I'm just afraid it just becomes kind of it can start to get used for anything, and I think we easily can just start to overcharge for no specific reasons, but this nebulous cloud of something someday.
Yeah. Warren, your thoughts?
I agree with not creating a separate fund, because the rec charge is not the only variable that plays into people's electricity bills. So we could have a situation where we are over collecting for RECs and we have some extra money there, but it could be a time when there's a price spike in underlying energy costs where we really want to give the ratepayers some rate relief, and we want to use that money to reduce electricity rate, offset some other increase we have, or who knows. So I just think there's no real point to segregate that money if extra funds are collected.
Okay. Laura or Dave, do you have, because you were there when we voted this in, do you have any objection to changing that?
Well, I think, I think the goal here is to get a written policy together. That's what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So, collecting the input from the board and adjusting is fine. And getting it into policy format. This is not policy format right now. This is more of what's gonna go inside of it is fine. If the board is, looking at this in terms of just renewable energy credits. And, if we have an over collection, which this year we will have, based on the forecast right now, an over collection, then we have to look at how we give it back. And, that's gonna be something that I think the board in the policy should be thinking about. If we're gonna keep it embedded in the energy charge, then we need to think about adjusting it as the prices change, so we don't over collect. And that would be, something that you would do annually. So, like right now, we're collecting around 3 million, plus or minus, a little bit, and that's enough to cover what we need to purchase for RECs. But it's also a little bit more than we need, and Laura can probably speak to the details of that a little bit better than I can. But the board at the time that said, well, if we over collect, we can keep that set aside so that we can buy into a clean project. That seemed okay to me at the time. It feels like the board's shifting, which is okay as well. Laura, I don't know if you want to chime in at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would recommend, Brian, that a volunteer on the board volunteer to draft up, right, this more overreaching policy document with their opinion about how it should work. And then it should be circulated and the input should be received, and maybe it ends up being adjusted because a majority of the board, doesn't agree with the way it was drafted. I think it's really a board call on how you want to do this. And in order to get it done, Brian, I would recommend you get, a volunteer to draft it up and then circulate it and, work through each one of these issues.
Yeah, I was planning on being that person, just because I want to get it done and out, because we're going to need to have the board on the same page by that February 28th meeting. And I want to make sure that we're all speaking with the same, plan. So, yeah, yes, Bianca.
I don't know if what I'm suggesting is absolutely ridiculous or just a different way to do this. Rather than worry about, so this, if this, this is for effectively for RECs, we can look at the price. We could do something where we look at the price generally, get a estimate for the year, collect based on that. If we under collect, then, that's too bad. Then we don't maybe buy enough RECs for that year. If we over collect, we can then flip it over into the collection bucket for the following year. Is there something, because I think that would remove all of the considerations around returning funds to customers, which seems to be, I'm gathering it's a, I don't know if it has been or it's a tricky issue, or it seems like that's been difficult to do over time. So if we just collect what we collect, you know, we buy based on our best forecast estimates. And then if we're short, we're short. Like, we didn't buy that for the year. It is what it is.
Yeah. There in the original write-up, there was a not to exceed the 100,000. Do we feel that that is an appropriate amount to hold year over year for that buffer for an increasing rec price? Do we feel that that should be, I mean, Dave, we're collecting about 3.3 million. Does that sound about right, Laura?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, so 100,000 is a small percentage of that. So if there's any change in the price of a rec upwards, we would want a bit of more of a buffer for that. I don't know what that number should be.
About if, you know, if the rec prices go up a lot and we didn't collect enough, we just don't buy the recs. It is what it is. Like, we
It's
make
the-
a best case estimate at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
And
it's the opposite that I'm concerned about, Bianca, where we've over collected. And then you know, let's say rec prices are $10 a rec, and we're collecting as if they are $30 or $40 a rec. And then at the end of the year, we find we've over collected. How much of that do we give back to customers in next year's lower rates? And how much of that do we retain for increases in the future from $10 to $40? Yeah. So, John?
I think, Brian, my answer to that would be, you know, some analysis, right? I mean, we need to have an understanding in terms of, you know, what's the potential volatility of rec prices, and how much of that do we want to be able to cover off with respect to this amount in the fund, which can be carried over from year to year. And then getting to Bianca's point, you know, the downside of it is that we could essentially be in a position where we're not able to purchase the volume of recs that we had otherwise would have liked to. So I feel like we can do a little bit of, you know, pretty simple math and come up with a reasonable estimate in terms of what that amount should be.
That's a good suggestion. I'll talk to Laura about how to do that. On setting an appropriate limit. Now, Laura was the one, I believe, that set the 100,000, unless the board did, and I don't remember. But yeah, okay. I think I've gathered enough thoughts to draft something up and get it out to the board, for the board to reply to me, for me to bring back all the replies to a future meeting. And we're right at our time along our agenda, but I'm going to take a moment to let Pamela Dritt make a quick comment focused on this clean energy strategy.
Thank you, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. Our overall goal is to decarbonize the energy supply and electrify everything as we green the grid. And the more we have local sources of this green power, the less we have to pay in distribution costs and overall market energy. And so therefore, I think we should aim at maximizing all our revenue sources until we have that infrastructure built out. And if that means we have a separate rate stabilization fund, or a rec fund that has a rollover into building green funds, we should do that and not give back any funds to the ratepayers until the infrastructure is done. And then we can start lowering the prices of power as it gets lower when we mostly generate local power. That
Yeah.
we need to be able to have funds for subsidizing local residential solar plus battery installations, for example.
Yes, so that's a good thing. I've added into the list of stuff to incorporate is how does local generation fit into the policy? How does in-town solar fit in? Now, to your comment, Pamela, about creating a fund to start saving money towards building these projects. The board is very willing to build these projects, but we would rather do it from a, here's a great project, we're going to issue debt strategy. And we're doing that with the middle school. We're talking about doing that again with the landfill. So it's not going to.
But we need both. What about the subsidization of like heat pump installation and solar and battery, particularly battery storage, and the build out of the local infrastructure to make a virtual power plant?
Yep. All of that stuff we're working on, but we want to keep this strategy clean and focused on the portfolio.
It should be
So just a
better,
different,
accurate, not necessarily clean. Simplicity is not a goal. Excellence is a goal.
all right.
Effectiveness is a goal.
Thank you.
And that makes it.
I'm gonna move on.
And before you do,
Yes.
I will send the board a copy of the fund balance policy, which does have a reference to the rec funds. And that way you have all that information in front of you as you're going through a new policy here, or, you know, updating a policy. But it is spelled out in that as well.
Great. Thanks. All right. So, thank you for your feedback on that. I will write something up. I'm a terrible writer, so please feel free to correct my grammar and spelling as well. But we'll get it done. And we're going to move on to the level 3 electric vehicle charging fees. Now that we have that level 3 station going in, there was a presentation included within the meeting packet. Dave, would you like Laura to lead this, or would you like to lead this?
Yeah, no, Laura's going to go through this. Laura, do you want to share, or do you want me to share?
Dave, if you would share, Brian, we did come out with a version 2 of this PowerPoint. It has some slight enhancements to it, no big changes. So I'd rather use that version than the one that was sent out to the board. So Dave, if you could bring up V2, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't have V2, so I'm going to have Dave.
It should be in the same folder.
You guys all see that?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's not in show mode, but it's
there we go.
okay. So we're under a bit of the gun to get a rate in place by the end of the year because we did receive substantial grant money to help offset the cost of this facility. And one of the requirements in the grant is that it has to be up and running by the end of the year, which means it has to have a rate. So we are requesting that the board consider the proposed rates that we're going to show you today to apply at least initially to this fast charging station until we can gather some data about usage levels that may inform a better rate in the future. So high level information, the station, including the transformer, had an all-in cost of about $150,000. The grant was $100,000. So what we're looking for, what we're suggesting is a new rate that will first and foremost be competitive in the marketplace and result in a high level of usage. We don't want to just put a price out there that recoups our investment, but that's so high that nobody uses it and we never recoup the investment. And so what we're going to propose is that we recoup the investment made in the station, so the $50,000, and to build up enough funds over 7 years to be able to replace the station in 7 years. So that's going to be what we're targeting. Next slide. So the biggest question is trying to figure out how much revenue we're going to generate. How many cars will use the station daily? I've come up with a complete, not random, but just a guess, okay, based on some of my observations of other fast charging stations and being conservative. I'm going to assume that one vehicle arrives each of 8 business hours a day and fills up with 20 kilowatt hours. Now, which is about 70 miles of range. The station can provide 100 kilowatts, but not all cars can accept 100 kilowatts. My little Volkswagen e-Golf can only accept 50 kilowatts. So if I pulled up to the station and plugged in, it would take me about 24 minutes to fill up with 20 kilowatt hours. But if you have one of the newer cars that can accept 100 kilowatts, it would take about 12 minutes. So that gives you an idea of sort of the utilization of the station that we're proposing here. If one comes per hour, if they were all 50 kilowatt cars, you know, it'd be being used almost 50% of the time, 24 minutes out of 60. But if they're newer cars, you know, you're only talking about assuming 12 minutes of usage each hour for only 8 hours a day. So I don't think the assumption here is all that unreasonable. How many days will it be used? Again, it's sort of a random guess. A few days a year, I figured people wouldn't use it, but I, for the most part, assumed it would be used 360 days a year. So those assumptions add up to 57,600 kilowatt hours of usage per year. If we were to sell it at the gross price that we're proposing of 45 cents per kilowatt hour during business hours, and it costs us about 13 cents in power supply costs to supply it, then the gross margin would be the net of 45 and 13, which is 31 cents, times the 57,000, which is about $18,000 a year. So next slide. If we look at, I just want to point out that, you know, the costs we're going to assume for this are going to be the initial setup, engineering, and transformer cost, that $50,000. Any ongoing O&M that we have to maintain the station on an annual basis. And then, as I said, reserving money to pay for a replacement in year 7. So next slide. This is just a quick economic net present value. You can see the 18,277 assumed revenue in year 1 based on those gross margin and cost of goods sold numbers we just went over, and the volume of 57,600. The costs are in year 0, the 50,000 we had to invest. And then I'm assuming O&M of about $2,500 a year. We really don't know what it's going to cost us to maintain this, so that could be very wrong. I'm growing that at 2.5% variable escalator per year. And then the replacement is basically taking, assuming it's going to cost us $100,000 to replace the station, but that's in today dollars. So we accelerate that at the variable cost escalator to get to a price in year 7. And then those dollars you see for replacement are assuming you were to set aside a reserve each year. In year 1, that reserve doesn't need to be as big as year 7 because it's going to grow interest. But by the time you get to year 7, it's a much larger number because it doesn't have the funds that you set aside don't have time to earn any money. Sorry, I kind of mangled that a little bit, but hopefully you understand that what we're looking at is revenue of 18,000 in the first year, cost of 15,000. So you're generating about 3,000, growing to $4,000 a year in cash flow. Well, that doesn't pay back the 50,000 that you sunk into it in year 0. And so you end up with a negative net present value of 26,967. So that doesn't pay for itself with the 45 cents we're going to propose. But if we go to the next slide, And this is one of the slides that's an enhancement. You didn't have this in your original packet because I didn't have it done by last week. But what I've put together here is a table of possible net present value outcomes for varying the kilowatt hours sold per year. Up at the top, you can see if you only sold 10,000 a year, all the way up to if you sell 100,000 a year. And then down in the rows, we have varying sale prices. If you were to sell at 30 cents, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, etc. And so if you marry two of those variables together, for example, if you sell 60,000 a year at 45 cents, you lose about 21,765, which is close to the number we looked at with the 57,000 sale price assumption. So the blue highlights are where you get a positive return. You either have to sell at a higher price, like 60 to 65 cents, or you have to sell a lot more. Like you can sell at 45 cents. If you sell 70,000 a year, you just about break even. You sell 80,000 a year, you return. So this just shows you how the net present value would change under different volumes sold and sale price assumptions, and hopefully provide some information on, you know, possible economic returns of this new asset. Next slide. So what we're proposing here is a time of use where the main part of the day, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m., is priced at 45 cents. We have an off-peak price that would apply from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on weekdays and all day on the weekends of 35 cents. And then we really don't want people to be using the station during the peak. And so we charge a much higher price, like 60 cents between 4 and 8 p.m. Next slide. How do these proposed rates compare on a cost per gallon of gasoline equivalent? Well, 35 cents is about $2.60 a gallon. 45 cents is about the current price of gas, $3.33. I think the prices are about $3.25 right now. And then the 60 cents is $4.44 a gallon. And if we look at what other merchant owners of these level 3 fast charging stations, companies like EVgo and PlugShare America, I can't remember the name exactly, but you know, you have people who have built these stations and are charging customers to charge up with fast charging, and the rates range from 30 cents of a low up to all the way up to like 75 cents. So what we're proposing definitely falls within the range of what other competitive suppliers are charging. And so we should be able to drive traffic to our station with these rates if we feel that they will be competitive. Is there another slide, Dave? Yeah, so this, I know the slide's a little confusing, but what it's designed to show is how long it takes different cars to add 100 miles of range in minutes. So if you see some of the older technology, like the Chevy Bolt in the lower left-hand corner, it takes it almost 44 minutes to gain 100 miles of range at a fast charging station, because its maximum acceptance rate is only 41 kilowatts. If you compare that to the Lucid Air Grand Touring, which can charge at 135 kilowatts, it wouldn't be able to charge at 135 kilowatts at our station because our station only provides 100 kilowatts. But if there were a station that provided 150 or higher kilowatts, it could charge 100 miles of range in just 8 minutes. And then there are ranges for these other cars that are in the middle of the Chevy Bolt and the Lucid Air.
Great. And so just to be clear, so what is the time of use structure that you're proposing? We went to that. So we had that slide. It was.
Can you bring the slide back up, Dave, that shows the proposed rate with the table? This is basically what we're asking the board to agree on today, is to set up rates that conform to, I think it's slide 7, yeah, that conform to this pricing structure.
So on on evenings from 4 to 8, the 4-hour period, Monday through Friday, when we hit our peak expenses, most of our R&S hours and so forth, it would be the 60 cents. During the workday, 6 a.m. to 4, it would be the average 45. And then off peak, the evening to 6 a.m. Or 8 to 6, and then all day on the weekend would be 35. Do we want to offer this? This is my first thought is the top two tiers, the mid and the peak, might work because most rapid charging is one flat price for all hours, and 35 cents is pretty inexpensive for charging a vehicle when you live in an IOU territory. I know my father is complaining to me about 50 cents a kilowatt hour for his house in North Andover. If this station, is attractive to those in Acton and other neighboring towns, they might come over on weekends to fill up, which could bring us revenue because it's lower. But it seems lower than the market is what my thought is.
E&E did tell us that I think it was Hingham, it put in a fast charging station and they're charging 30 cents. And there are a few around there that are that low. And remember, when I made those volumetric assumptions, I didn't assume any off-peak sales. I was saying one car shows up for each 8-hour period during the day. So to the extent we can drive off-peak sales, we can add to our margin because our cost of goods sold is only 13 cents. So every time we sell for more than 13 cents, we're adding margin to help pay back this investment.
Okay. Warren.
Yeah, thanks for this careful work and all the analysis. And I'm comfortable going with this proposal, although I also could be comfortable with other things. The one thing I would say, I just don't see how you get to a 45-cent average sales price, which you were saying at the beginning. If you only are charging more than 45 cents 4 hours a day, and you're only doing it 5 days a week, and you're charging 35 cents for a much longer period of time, including all the weekends, it seems like the average charge is going to be less than 45 cents.
So I agree with what you're saying in principle, Warren, but in the very simplistic little model we've generated here, that the assumption that one car would show up for each of 8 hours is only assuming that we're going to earn any revenue in the mid-peak period. And that any sales we make at peak or off peak are actually additive to that gross margin and would help provide a better return.
Bianca.
Does that make sense? The way
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Although I also, think those numbers of how much use the charging station might get may be on the optimistic side.
You
but,
could be right.
We don't know.
But the more competitive we make the rate, the likelier that we do drive some traffic.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with your proposal for what to charge. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, we probably won't average 45 cents kilowatt hour.
And
You could be right, definitely.
yeah, as Laura prefaced this presentation, we don't really have information. We're guesstimating based on approximate what we see in the market. We don't know what the traffic will be, what the exact, so this is a real ballpark kind of effort. And yeah.
Which it will need to be reviewed, as we get data, and similar to what we did with the level 2s, right? So we came up with a number, it got adopted, and then we continually look at it based on charging rates. We're going to have to do the same thing with this, and this is going to be a little bit more important because the demand coming off of this is going to be much higher.
Yeah. Bianca.
Yeah, so couple of things here. So on the net present value, we got a grant, so it was only 50. Okay, replacement cost might be higher, but I think this is a fast moving industry, and in 7 years, I have no idea where we'll be. I just, I think maybe perhaps, and Laura, I think you've made this point, things, I know technology tends to have a deflationary trend over time. So maybe in 7 years' time, it won't cost 150,000. Maybe there's going to be more grants available. So I would encourage us to look at this as an opportunity for battery, to think about it as a battery storage, right? I know we're struggling with some peak solar production, apparently mostly in April, right? If I heard David right. This is an opportunity to test just, how well it could work as battery, effectively some storage or increase, just offloading some of that peak solar production. Obviously, that's a very particular, it's a small point in time that we're dealing with, but nevertheless, I think maybe, I don't know, I would just go with the lowest rate possible. I'm not at all concerned about the revenue part. I mean, we just the grant, and then the fact that I think that there's, in the next 7 years, there's going to be more technology at a lower cost. So those are my thoughts.
So I think one thing that I want to add here is the grant money is factored into these numbers. So
No, but they're not though. I think, but
Oh,
Laura, the replacement cost sheet was for 150, right?
100.
100.
We wouldn't have the cost of all the installation, the transformer, all that stuff would already be there when we have to go replace it in year 7. So it's only the 100.
Yeah, so she factored in a replacement cost of 100.
Yeah.
Which, I'm optimistic that it could be that's lower. I mean, obviously it makes good planning sense to think, okay, this is what we know now. This is the cost today. We have to use the cost, what we know today. But I guess all I'm saying is, we could start off, if we start off with the lowest possible, we start off with, a mega sale, I think we get demand. And then we can, it's easier to slow down demand by increasing the cost than to start off high. And then people are like, well, I don't know if that's a great place to charge. There's a better place somewhere else. But if everyone thinks like, let's go charge in Concord because it's cheap, then we will immediately know what the possible demand is, and we can ratchet up from there.
I agree with that, Bianca. I think that's a good thought. I also, a simple rate structure. When if you're looking for a charging station and you're flipping through 5 or 6 in the area, then you have to read a rate schedule and you have to figure out what time it is and what's it gonna cost? Is that cheaper than this other one that's just 30 cents all the time or 60 cents all the time? Yeah, so I think merging the mid peak and off peak and all those, just having on peak being 65 cents and then mid and off being 40 cents for all those hours would be easier for customers to understand. John, your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I guess a little different perspective. I feel like where we are, and this is going to change over time, but where we are today, there's relatively limited amount of EV charging infrastructure. And, I have an EV, and frankly, when I charge, I'm making decisions as to where to charge based on convenience. And I have to think that's true of most parties. And I really don't think that it's a market where there's a relatively high level of price transparency. You know, it's not like a gas station where people are posting their price. So, you know, based on my view, and I think that, you know, we should really focus on a pricing framework that recovers costs. And you know, that's an appropriate, you know, prudent strategy.
I also wanted to ask Laura and Dave, is this a two-headed charger? So two vehicles could charge at the same time, or is this a single?
So this one's, there's two charging stations. Both have two plugs, but only can use one at a time. We got the two different plugs. So two cars can charge at the same time. They're independent stations. I think one of the things that I want to mention here is the state's come out and basically identified areas in the Commonwealth that need level 3 chargers. Route 2 is one of them. And, you know, it meets all the criteria. It's less than a mile off of Route 2, so on and so forth. So it's expected to get used. And, you know, Laura has forecasted some conservative numbers that I agree with. But I think the rate structure that she's proposed is what should be adopted to start. And then we can review data as it comes and adjust. So I'm strongly encouraging the board to go with what's been proposed and to review it a year after it's in effect, and we'll have some data to go over.
Okay. Warren.
Yeah, two things. I agree with Dave that, you know, we shouldn't angst too much about this. It's an experiment. We try it. We could modify it. The one thing I would not want to do was eliminate the difference between the rates between peak, mid-peak, and off-peak. And the reason I say that, we're trying to educate the town on the fact that we're going to time of use rates, and there's a different value to electricity at different times of the day. We should be consistent and make that point at the charging station as well as elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I suggested that I like simple, but I'm okay with what we have. If Dave and Warren and others agree, and that's a very good point, Warren, about consistency with the TOU structure for the town.
So I think, Brian, just two things quickly. One is that I failed to mention it in the PowerPoint, but it's an important pricing component, and that is that we should definitely have idle fees.
Yes.
So I think what E&E has told us is pretty standard across the industry is $1 a minute. But we'll have some kind of grace period, whether that's 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I was going to check with the E&E and see what they think is standard. I think 10 minutes is probably the right time frame, and then institute the idle fee. And in terms of the price, I mean, I think you and Bianca make great points that if you start off low, people get in the habit of coming. And so I would say that maybe the choice is between the structure we proposed or a structure that is 60-40-30. Because Eric Scribner told me, I think I told you that Hingham was charging 30, but it's actually, Hingham is using a flat rate of 35. And there's a new DC fast charger at a Ford station
In Maynard.
in Holyoke. That's
Oh.
30 cents.
Yeah.
So that would be on the very low end of what we see. If you really want to go lower, we could do 60-40-30, or we could do the 60-45-35.
I like the 60-40-30.
I'm happy with pretty much whatever you feel you want to suggest, Laura and Dave, because this is very new. This is, you know, you've heard our thoughts. This is as pointed out earlier, this is an experiment to see how it goes. I do agree with Bianca's start low, go high when we find it's not enough, because then we can see what traffic is possible. But I don't have strong opinions either way. The cables that are the plugs that are there are CCS. Is there a Tesla standard as well, or is it just CCS?
It's dual. They have the two different ones.
Okay. All right.
So my recommendation, is to stay with the 60, 45, 35, because that's what the analysis was based on, and the data that we have supports that. We don't have data to support going 60, 40, 30 right now. And I want to have the data in case someone asks how we came up with the numbers. So that's what I'm recommending the board vote through today. And then we implement it. And we do need the board to vote on this because we have basically 11 days to finish up the project and submit the stuff to the state so that we can still get the $100,000 grant.
All right. So we're not going to be reviewing a rate schedule. We're going to be voting today.
Yeah, it should these are just charging fees. So
yeah. Okay. It is on the agenda. All right. So there's Warren, you look like you have a thought.
Well, I was gonna make a motion, but I don't know if anybody else wants. I was gonna make a motion to support these rates, but if somebody wants to come in with something else, they should do that first.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'd like a motion to go with the 60, 40, 30 rate. I mean, unless I don't know, David, you said we needed data. We have plenty of data.
no,
This
we
was
don't.
just a
I mean, the
model.
analysis we did was based on 60, 45, 35. So all the supporting data for these fees are in this proposal. We don't have supporting data for 60, 40, 30 is what I'm saying.
Well, I think, so if you go up one slide, Dave, from where you are,
Oop.
right there. So if our price is going to be 40 cents, okay, rather than 45, there are just fewer volumetric scenarios where that can return our investment. You can see that even selling 80,000 a year, we would still lose $5,737. We would have to sell over that, 90,000, you start to generate positive NPV. So it's just that there are, fewer scenarios where we can return our investment. But, I think this analysis just kind of shows you, what the volumetric hurdle would have to be to make the 40-cent scenario work. Not saying it's not possible. It's just, but it's a higher hurdle, if you will.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to go with the 60, 40, 30. Just because just on the, we can always change the rate, but let's just see where, if the prices are low, we get the demand. We know, hopefully we find out what maximum demand is. Hopefully we're dealing with, there's a traffic jam and now we got to deal with that.
Well, Bianca, why don't we do that? Why don't you make the motion and we'll have John, Warren, and myself vote. And we'll see if we agree.
Okay.
So,
not sure how to, okay, so I'd like to make a motion to open the vote for proposed rates at 60, or should I'd make a motion to open the vote for proposed rates and then nothing further?
no, you can say a motion to approve the proposed rates with the change of mid-peak being 40 cents and off-peak values being 30 cents.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed rates and changing them to the peak at 60, the mid-peak at 40, and the off-peak at 30.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
So John, thank you. Warren?
Yes.
John?
No,
You know,
That's fine.
no.
Okay.
fine.
Bianca?
Yes.
And I'm going to agree as well. I know we don't have perfect analysis, but I agree with the philosophy of start low and adjust high if needed. All right. So we've taken a vote. I think we're done with this topic. Is that right, Laura? We have
Yep.
everything you need?
Yeah, well, and we're gonna do the standby fee, $1 a minute, after some period of minutes, which I'm gonna ask E&E about. I'm thinking it's gonna be 10.
Okay. And did you need a vote on the idle fee or?
No, I think this is, again, it's sort of part of the details, and we've voted on the substantive part of the rate question.
Great. Pamela, I'm gonna keep going on the agenda and we'll take public comments. No, we're gonna keep moving. So the next discussion topic is power supply and the public forum presentation. Dave, did you want to take this or do you want me to take this?
No, you can take this, Brian.
All right. I am going to share my screen. Word document. All right, does everyone see a Word document? I got nods, yes, okay. So this is what I have for notes on this public forum that we hope to do on February 28th in the evening. It is basically going to cover our, the question came from how much nuclear should be in the portfolio. And in order to ask the public their sentiments on how much nuclear should be in the portfolio, we have to explain the portfolio and our strategy. So this goes along with that, that document we talked about earlier today. So, you know, understanding, you know, how certificates work with the state to calculate what is clean electricity or non-emitting versus renewable. So the state's calculation is summary of our certificates and that plan that we are going to write up in a formal, well, I'm going to call it a policy document, but whatever we want to call it, strategy. Provide an understanding of the emissions per unit of energy, and to give an understanding of how we do power purchase agreements, and an understanding of pricing in relative terms, because we don't want to disclose exact pricing, but we do need to give people a sense that nuclear is far less expensive than a brand new wind project or so forth. And there is resources. So this was heavily discussed back in December of 2020. So I can send you this link to see that meeting and that discussion. But the purpose of this meeting is to put our strategy into context so that we could get an opinion from the public on what they want as their sources of energy. Do they want to spend tons of money and do only renewable wind and solar, or do they want it to be more affordable, and get a sense from the public about their thoughts on this mix? And so we're going to have to create a presentation for the meeting, and as well as do all the logistics of offering a meeting. So that's what we're discussing. What is first thoughts on this meeting, John?
Brian, I think this meeting, it's a great idea, and I think it's an important opportunity for kind of public input, because I think there are a number of issues here that it's appropriate for the public to weigh in on. And I would to me, I think it needs to be much broader than kind of nuclear generation. And some of the thoughts that I would have in terms of how to approach it is, I think right up front, we need to make the point in terms of why one needs a portfolio, and the benefits of the diversity that one gets from a portfolio, and talk about the fact that, you know, one of the critical issues that any portfolio has to address is how customer demand varies over time, and, you know, raise the very real issue of the fact that renewable resources are variable and their output changes. And solar in particular has, you know, a favorable output in terms of high coincidence with peak demand periods. But as the penetration gets higher, there can be some challenges in terms of integration. And, you know, so I think, you know, I clearly have some thoughts, more very happy to participate in terms of developing materials. And, you know, that's some of my thoughts there.
Great. Well, thank you for the offer to help. I think I will probably take you up on that in some fashion as we get closer. Warren, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with virtually everything John said. Although we want to get input on nuclear, we shouldn't bill this as a nuclear generation meeting. We should bill it as a meeting about the power supply for the town of Concord. And I wrote to Dave, I will not be able to be there on that day because I'm going to be away.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Warren. Like, don't call it a nuclear meeting. That's going to get some nuclear.
Right. It's a power supply meeting.
Yeah.
I had a question for the board about, we have a solar task force that is coming up with a schedule and a plan for in-town renewable resources. What is the light board's feeling on their involvement in this meeting? I mean, it is our charge to do this, but the task force is assisting us in that effort. Warren.
I would encourage them to be there, but I would also say this is a meeting to get input and views from the town. I would be hesitant to do something that leads to long presentations where we filibuster, and by the time you get around to town input, you're left with the last 10 minutes of the meeting.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I feel that they definitely should be invited and be present and acknowledged, and that they can share with us what they feel they'd like presented. But this is our public forum, and it's to talk about the portfolio primarily and nuclear's role in it. But it is good to talk with the public about in-town solar as part of that discussion.
Yeah.
And the goals that we have for that. And storage. That can quickly spiral into other things like metering domain and other tools, but I want to avoid that in this meeting, because I want this meeting to be focused on the generation side of the portfolio rather than the management of energy, which would go over the heads of the vast majority of the audience. What do you think is a good next step in preparing for this. Let me ask Dave, the logistics of the meeting. Do we have a location? Did the board come back to you with a specific 5 or 6 o'clock that evening?
So, 5 or 6 works for 3 of the board members, so we would have a quorum. I haven't heard from everyone yet, but Warren did mention that he's not going to be available. So we can do either 5 or 6. And I think, really the format of the meeting should be a presentation on the full power supply, what's included in it as an overview, and then solicit public feedback is the approach that I was thinking anyway.
Yeah, yes, I agree that we should have a presentation focused on the power supply and how we're cleaning that up and managing pricing, and then getting feedback from the audience. Yeah, and keep it simple and focused on, generation sources rather than, generation sources and certificates, the energy and the attributes, but not getting into management of the distribution network and energy storage and that side. I think that would derail the conversation. Laura, your thoughts?
So I understand your desire to keep it simple and clean, focused on generation, but I do think you are going to get those, some of whom are in this meeting right now, who will say that their goal, what they want to see, is 100% generation solar in town. And so, to John's point of discussing the importance of dispatchability and cost, I think you're inevitably going to get sort of sucked into a discussion about how the cost of doing that, right? Because it's not the same to build the solar in town as it is to build the solar on the grid and use the grid to balance it. I mean, I
Okay.
just feel like you're going to get sucked into that because there are going to be people who stand up and say that's what they want to see for their generation portfolio.
Yeah, I think, not preparing for that kind of question, I think my first response would be electricity would become too expensive for mass adoption under that scenario, which would make transportable fuels more price favorable, which is not what we want. But again, I could prepare a better response, and that's a good thing to think about. John.
Yeah, no, I share some of Laura's concerns in terms of, I feel like if we are going to have a, meaningful input, we do have to, raise some of the issues in terms of associated with constraints. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to contain because a lot of people will not understand that topic and will be learning in the meeting, and it's technical and most don't. Yeah.
Well, and it's going to come to light, I think, that this purported goal of 20 megawatts of in-town solar is going to be very, very expensive to accomplish because of dispatchability issues, because of limitations on the distribution system, et cetera.
Yeah, and people will argue that it won't be, and then we'll get into the details of, yeah, it'll distract from our primary goal of having this meeting, which is where do you want your energy coming from? Do you want it from solar? Do you want it from nuclear? Do you want it from gas with buying the offsets? Which is what I hope to focus the meeting on. We can also do another public forum in the future to talk about those topics. Bianca.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think that if I understood correctly, the purpose of this meeting is to make sure that when we do, if we are going to increase the size of our nuclear portfolio, that it's done so with the knowledge and support of the town, right? And we do know that this is a very environmentally focused town, and that nuclear, it is non-emitting, but it has other problems. So I think if we put this meeting out there as to discuss the portfolio, the energy portfolio of the town, and we bring up the nuclear, the other stuff, the other extraneous stuff is always going to come up because it is of top of mind, right? So anytime, you say, oh, let's talk about energy, it's going to come up. But I think that we can still walk away from the meeting, even if there's distraction and less of a focus on nuclear, not nuclear. If the other stuff comes up, we can still, the discussion has been had. The topic has been opened, and we can safely walk away from that meeting saying, okay, yes. So, it seems that we have enough support to move forward with the nuclear expansion of the nuclear portfolio, or not. And then the other stuff will continue. But I think the goal, if I understand correctly, the goal can still be accomplished, even if it's not, highlighted as the.
Yeah, I think we'll have to manage conversations so that we make sure that primary goal is accomplished, and not let other details run the meeting when the Q&A starts. But Warren, your thoughts?
Yeah, to address the concern that Laura was raising, I think this meeting should be framed specifically around the fact that no matter what happens with in-town generation, in the near term, we're going to be purchasing power from outside of town. And this meeting is to get perspectives about what sorts of power we should be purchasing from outside the town of Concord. This isn't a discussion about whether we should have a 20 megawatt solar goal or a 15 megawatt solar goal. This is to say for however amount we're getting from outside of town, where are we getting it from? So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second point is, this isn't a vote. We're trying to learn interesting perspectives and points of view. It's not like we're going to, at the end of the day, take a vote from everybody in the audience and say, this is a definitive decision about what happens. We're just trying to get to learn the range of opinions out there.
Yes, I agree with that. It's great. John.
Yeah. Warren said it better than I, but I do think we need to step back, and maybe the place to start would be to really focus in terms of getting input on, first of all, agreement with respect to, 100% non-emitting resources, and then kind of possibly get into the issue of, okay, is it appropriate for some of these non-emitting resources to be resources such as nuclear, conceivably large hydro resources, and really not get into kind of the specific elements of what proportion of the power supply should be solar, what proportion should be in-town solar, what proportion should be wind, but to as Warren suggested, try to keep it higher level.
Okay, yeah. It's more of, here's what our portfolio is, here's what our priorities are. We're listening for your thoughts on what we're doing. We're not asking you to prescribe a mix for the board to build. Is that a good restatement of that, John?
Yeah.
Okay. We're at 9 o'clock. Other thoughts on this meeting? Seeing none, I'm going to move to public comments. Pamela.
Thank you for all your hard work, you guys. You're wonderful, all of you. I want to agree with Warren that our rates should be time of use because we want to educate people on how they work, but also we want to change people's behavior. The rates should be enough to make people who care about the price of things to not charge during peak and to charge during off peak. And that means the higher you have the differential, the more incentive to change behavior is. Also, I want to point out it's much better to start out too high than too low. People feel good when the price is lowered and bad when the price is raised. We only have one chance here to start with pricing of a fast charger here. And I strongly suggest you change your vote to make it flatter and make it more differentiated.
Okay.
And also, what kind of fast charger are we building?
It's level 3, so it's going to be a 100 kilowatt DC fast charger. It's got a CCS and a Tesla cord on each, and there's 2 of them.
It has a Tesla cord on it?
That's, I believe, what Dave said. Yes, so it has both of the US standards for cars. I personally haven't seen it.
Have a next charger. Did you investigate Tesla putting a supercharger?
I think Tesla would have to reach out to us. I don't think that was not part of the grant process. This came out of a grant. So we can follow up with more details, and you can go to Rideout and see it and see what it is.
Also, I think that are we going to have the level 2 chargers there too? Or does this replace them?
This replaces the level 2. The level 2 is gonna be relocated to another section of town.
You have another question, Pamela, or can I move on to Phil?
I think we should stop waiting for Tesla to reach out to us. They won't. We need to actually check them when we do infrastructure like this, because Tesla is the state of the art and has gotten cheaper as time. They iteratively improve, and everyone is going to end up using the Tesla supercharging system. All the automobile makers for electric cars are changing to that because it works better and is a larger system. And I also want to mention that I just drove to Washington. So I stopped at fast chargers, and most of them had differing time rates. In other words, it was more expensive in peak.
Oh, good. All right. Phil.
Yes, thanks, Brian. I didn't catch the date of this upcoming forum on the energy mix.
February 28th.
Okay, and the time?
5 or 6 p.m. TBD. It's going to be in the evening on the 28th.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Seeing no more public comments, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I got a nod from Bianca, so a second. John.
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
Bianca.
Yes.
And I agree as well. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye now.